Cafe with Cavanha brings today the topic coronavirus and the consequence in the supply chain with Professors Dale Rogers, Arizona State University, Zachary Rogers, Colorado State University, Stephen Carnovale, Rochester Institute of Technology. Good evening, professors. Thank you for coming for this new cafe.
Great to be with you.
Thanks for having
us.
A pleasure to have you here again.
I can't go anywhere else right now, so I might as well be here talking to you.
Good. Good. After 2 weeks of our previous cafe, is it possible to better understand the impact of coronavirus on the global supply chain? Professor Dale Rogers.
Yes, let me share something with you. So maybe your viewers are very familiar with this. This is something that I like to look at every day. And this is a map that Johns Hopkins University, one of the great universities in the U.S., is doing of the globe and where coronavirus cases are. And if you look at where we were, and I don't know if you can see my cursor here, but we talked, what was it, right at the beginning of March, and we were right about here, and we have skyrocketed up to here, and it's just amazing. And when we talked a couple of weeks ago, the U.S. was just a few red dots, and now solidly, particularly in the East Coast, and it's the very worst where Stephen is, and in New York. He's in upstate New York, not New York City, but it's really bad there. And this is having a huge impact on supply chains. Now, in the U.S., one of the impacts I think is surprising to the three of us, Stephen and Zach and I. Maybe it shouldn't be surprising. It's at least surprising to me. And the three of us are part of the team that does the Logistics Managers Index here in the U.S. And we haven't finished out the month of March. We still have a few more days to go. Today is the 26th. So we've got 5 more days after today. And as long
I
as
have a bunch of the graphs made up. Do you want me to share my screen?
Sure, I'll quit sharing and you can share. But one of the things that's really interesting is, and I think Zach's going to show you this, is that logistics activity in the U.S. So many businesses are damaged. They passed a huge aid package late last night, but so many of the businesses are hurt. But if you're a trucker or a warehousing company, this is probably great for you.
Yeah, so let me sort of walk you through some stuff here.
I shouldn't say it like that. It's not great for anybody, but
you're busy.
Business is expanding.
You're busy, and let me show you why. So these are some pictures I took, Cavanha. This is from the Target by my house where I usually buy food. I was looking for soup the other day, and you can see there's only one flavor left. All the good ones are gone. All they have left is split pea and ham, which I don't know if you're familiar with split pea and ham, but there's a reason that one's still on the shelf.
Yeah, that's true.
I have to take a serious objection. That is a delightful flavor. But anyway, continue, please.
No one else is going to take anything you say for the rest of this podcast seriously after that.
Yeah, Zach grew up without ever having that at our house, I think, because it was banned, at least when I was home.
Yeah, it wasn't allowed to be at the house. But so anyway, you see this everywhere. It's not just with soup. It's with paper goods. I was at the grocery store yesterday, and they did an announcement saying you could only have 1 frozen chicken per person, so many things of diapers, et cetera, et cetera. And so we sort of have the situation where it's hard for retailers, especially downstream, to keep anything on the shelves because it's everything's moving so quickly. And this comes right after the holiday season when we had kind of worn our inventories down. And so we kind of spent up, you think about it like a bank account, we sort of spent up all of our savings over the holidays, And now we have this giant bill coming due. And so there's this rush to get things from suppliers to the retailers. And so if you look at the Logistics Managers Index for March, and again, this is still preliminary, these numbers will change a little bit, although we have enough, our sample size is big enough now that I feel confident about the directions. The magnitude might change a little bit, but that's all. So if we think about capacity, warehouse capacity is negative right now. So any number for your viewers, if they recall, any number below 50 indicates contraction. Any number above 50 indicates expansion. And so you can see last month we had a big kind of expansion. There was a lot of warehouse space available because, again, we had burned off a lot of inventory after the holidays. And then suddenly we have this drop. This is the largest drop month to month that we've had in the 3.5 years that we've been doing the supply chain, the Logistics Managers Index. If you look a step further, closer to the consumer at transportation capacity, look at this arc. Transportation capacity in March projects to be contracting for the first time since October of 2018. So if you kind of think about the way the economy has been going, in 2018 it was hot. All over the world, we were shipping a lot of stuff. There was the big, the movement was continuing from retail to online. And just in general, like orders for fleets were really high. I think August and September of 2018, we had record orders for the number of trucks because the market was so tight. Fast forward a little bit, and we get the trade war and the kind of general slowdown we've seen in the economy throughout 2019, and capacity goes up. So remember, anything under 50 is contraction. So for all of 2018, we just could not keep enough capacity in the transportation market. We get to 2019, and it spikes. I mean, looking at a year ago, I guess it was April of 2019, it was 72. That's the highest we've ever measured. And it stayed positive. The arc was curving down, but it had stayed positive until this month. And we think what that represents is retailers pushing as much inventory out as they can. So one of the things we're missing on the shelves here in the US that's really hard to keep in stock is toilet paper. So if you think about how you ship toilet paper is really big, but also not very profitable, right? Takes up a lot of space. The volume to value ratio, though, isn't very good. So if you're going to ship toilet paper, you're going to try to cube out the whole truck, meaning every cubic inch of the truck is going to have product in it. And then you're going to send very few trucks. Right now, we're hitting the point where you probably need to cube out the whole truck, and you need to send a new truck every day to Costco, every day to the Walmart distribution center. And so right now, companies are scrambling, companies like Procter & Gamble, for instance, or Tyson Chicken, they're scrambling to find transportation capacity so they can fill all of these orders. Because orders from the retailers to the suppliers have actually gone up for certain staple goods. There's some things probably we're not buying a lot of right now, but staple goods like paper products or food has gone way, way up. This is also reflected if we go forward and look at transportation utilization and transportation price. Transportation utilization, this graph on the left, shows, okay, of the available transportation capacity, how much are we using? This is bopped up into the 60s, our highest one again, our highest number in about a year. So meaning that of the available space, we're using more of it than we had been before, which makes sense given that capacity seems to be harder and harder to find. And this is up a lot from January and February this year. And then you look at price, and that's our highest number for price, again, in over a year. So price for transportation had been contracting. We had seen a softening in the transportation market where tender rejections were low. We weren't building new fleets. Actually, fleets were being idled. So there was a lot of 3PLs and carrying companies going out of business at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. And now suddenly we get to March and we see this big spike. And so I think it's interesting because for most of the economy, most parts of it, COVID-19 has been pretty terrible. But if you're in trucking specifically or in the logistics industry, it's actually kind of a boom time. And we're seeing more business right now than we've seen in over a year. And so it's, I think, a really kind of interesting really interesting dynamic that we have right here.
Right. And this may not be what and these might not be the results we end up with for this particular month. They may be up or down a little bit, but probably they're going to be in general up over what they've been, going into.
Yeah, the direction won't change at this point.
Yeah, the last quarter of 2019, we're really starting to see a decline, really the effects of the trade war. And this virus, which is a horrible thing, a lot of people are dying, is actually an artificial stimulus because of, sort of the beer game effect, where you accelerate demand, you over respond to whatever's happening, and that's really happened with consumers who are afraid of running out of stuff. And so so that's actually been temporarily good for the logistics business, good for Amazon and folks like that. It's really it's really been interesting. Now, it's been terrible for for small businesses, hair salons and
Small services providers.
Yeah, it's been terrible for them, but it's been really good for the folks that are involved in logistics, really.
Before we go to Stephen, Zach and Dale, you have data up to March. Can we predict something for the next months coming?
I don't think that we can yet.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think that we can yet. And that's because we don't even have all of the data for March collected. So when we put out the logistics index, and it will be coming out, we're putting it out early this month because this is such an uncertain economic time. We want to get the data out as fast as we can. So the full report will be out on April 3rd. And we're happy to send you a copy, and you can share with any of your listeners. We'd be happy to have everybody see it. So I don't know. And the thing is that it's unclear if this sort of spike we're seeing right now is going to continue. So it might be that everyone is sort of rushing out right now. We have to get the chicken, we have to get the toilet paper, we have to get whatever it is. And then after sort of that rush is over, we might see things slow back down again. I don't know if that will happen for sure. And you would imagine that as people don't have income, that retail sales have to go down somewhat. Now, maybe the stimulus will come out and it'll help, but I'm not sure.
And typically what we would do.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Stephen.
No, it's okay.
One question. It's good that hear from you, but the problem is more in the consumption side than the manufacturing side. What's your view?
I've been thinking a lot about our last chat and now kind of reflecting on it, and I think a couple things really stuck out to me. The first thing that sticks out to me is what factors are intersecting. So I often view supply chain and marketing as two sides of the same coin, because I don't think they can exist without each other. One generates the demand and one satisfies it.
Well, and Stephen, here's an old professor interrupting you, and I apologize for that, but I'll let you keep talking, I promise. But actually, there was a book by a marketing scholar, probably before you were born, maybe, called Reverse Marketing, and it was about procurement. Michael Linders, who's a famous Canadian supply chain and marketing professor. And so you're absolutely right. The beginnings of procurement as a discipline, certainly, and a lot of supply chain, certainly logistics side, one of the fathers of that is marketing. Anyway, sorry to interrupt. No,
not at all. Yeah, no, because that's exactly right. I mean, so what I've been thinking about is the behavioral side of this, where in the marketing field, they've been talking a lot, probably the early part of around 2011 or so. A lot of people started talking about contagion. And it's partly what got me interested in supply networks. And so this contagion that happens, it's kind of built on the exact thing we're seeing with disease spreading. So if you look at epidemiology models, they basically look at graphs and they see the degree to which nodes or people or companies or whatever are connected. And from those connections, you can predict with a certain degree of certainty how fast and to what areas the spread of something is going to go. In this case, it's the way that the virus is spreading. In marketing, they were looking at contagion for things like key influencers and who would actually influence brand recognition. Well, you fast forward till now, and you look at the pictures that Zach showed with empty shelves. I had an even more interesting, I think, anecdote, which I never thought would happen in this situation. I was at Trader Joe's because for whatever reason, no one goes there in my area and it's filled with food. And my wife and I were looking around to stock up the pantry. And a woman who was near us saw my wife in the direction of some kind of chili sauce. Now, we had no intention of buying the chili sauce. The woman saw that we were looking at it. She came right in front of us and said, I need all 3 of these chili sauces. And she cleared it out, which is bizarre to me because there was barely any food. But you take that, and what ends up happening is it's a contagion of panic that spurs people panic buying. And then that panic buying spurs a contagion effect with other people panicking. And so back to your original question, is it on the manufacturing side or is it on the consumption side? I think a lot of what we talked about in the last chat where you're going to have that, I think Dale mentioned the 3-month effect. You're going to see a huge shock initially where people are panic buying. Those 40 to 30-day inventories get depleted up immediately. Then you have to go back to the next step, and that bullwhip effect that occurs, it's going to amplify. I think the benefit that we have in the States, at least, is a lot of our food is produced here. Not all of it, certainly, but a fair amount of it. But it's just a fascinating thing. And then to go back to what Zach was saying before, and to your question, can you predict what's going to happen under normal circumstances? What we would do is we would look at the data and we would try to pick out the lag structure. We would try to see how many periods back are going to impact the next period forward. The problem now is you've got this exogenous shock hitting all 3 of those sectors: transportation, warehousing, and inventory. So I would say stay tuned for the data that we're going to see. And it's conceivable if something crazy happens, a different kind of contagion, you would see all different results. So it's really challenging, I think, at this point to predict anything.
And can we see some kind of disruption for food and drugs and medicines?
Yeah, I think it's all contingent on it's all contingent on what may happen, I think. And obviously, I know that's a really general statement, which isn't saying much, which is a lot of what academics do, I think. But, where the biggest disruption is going to be, I think people have probably stocked up on toilet paper by now and realized that perhaps we should look at other foods. But the interesting thing is I would say the time lag of what people are buying. And I've been observing this. Thermometers are beginning to, if they haven't already been cleared off shelves, basic pantry staples like brown rice, oatmeal, things like that. Those seem to have been, slowly depleting off of shelves, canned tomatoes and things like that. So, what I'm wondering in my mind, and I really don't know the answer, I don't know if this is kind of a cyclical thing, where if the exponential growth rate, which is what we're seeing, it's an exponential growth rate, if that's occurring, and eventually over the summer, if the social distancing and the other measures that we're doing, if it ends up flattening the curve, if people will think, oh, well, the worst is behind us, let me go back to normal, and people running thin inventories at their homes or whatnot, and then the exogenous shock hits again, it's going to be interesting. So, the one thing I'll conclude on with that.
Don't you think, though, Stephen, don't you think that the flattening the curve, it's too late? In the U.S., we're not flattening the curve. It's already over. We're not testing enough people. We're really on the steepest track, the steepest climb of any country. So we're not going to flatten the curve. Now, the benefit of that is that we might get through it quicker.
Yeah.
because we'll go up fast and then it should come down fast. That usually means more people die.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's probably going to be a bounce back.
No, that's exactly it. Because I think there's two things that play with the curve, particularly for the U.S., or maybe even specifically for the U.S. I think the way that the virus has rolled out in terms of its spread across the country is juxtaposed with measures that states are taking. And that's another kind of contagion effect that's happening too. You see different states doing different restrictions, and then there's this kind of mimetic behavior between them. But I think regionally, if you were to isolate and break down the data, you're going to see simultaneously a slowing and an acceleration of different curves by state. And I think, because there's been a lot of interesting theories people have advanced about this. There's one I saw, I think it might have been Israel, where the logic was quarantine the most vulnerable groups, let everybody get exposed to it, and then generate herd immunity. That way the virus kind of separates out. That might be manageable for a smaller country like Israel. I think the problem that we have, which is also why it's challenging to compare the numbers one-to-one, is we've got 330 million people, and we don't have the command and control style ability to clamp down an entire country. Now, what's interesting is what's going to happen, I think, with India. Of course, they've got a larger population than we do, and over the weekend, I think it was, they announced they're clamping down, with social distancing and things like that. So it's there's a lot of dynamics here happening. To analyze it with any static approach, I wouldn't be comfortable doing. There's so many dynamics at play, both human behavior, the supply chain. I mean, just everything that's just interacting in this stew of confusion. I don't know how else to describe it. It's chaotic.
It's not the same thing as the 1919 virus, but it seems like it spreads as virulently as that virus did. And the results of that, the stuff that really worked in that are the same things that we should probably be practicing now. And I saw a documentary of a town up in Alaska. Now, this was before Alaska was officially a U.S. state. I think it was a U.S. territory at the time. And there were 80 people, Eskimos, living in this little village, and 75 of them got wiped out because, this is a remote village in Alaska. And there's been some confusion, I think, that, this thing isn't really going to spread globally. But if you look at that map I was showing from Johns Hopkins, it's already all over the place, and in particular places like, say, Zimbabwe or Honduras. This is going to just decimate the economy, and they don't have the resources of the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve that we do. So there's going to be long-term both people and definitely supply chain implications from this. People say, well, this isn't going to be bad as the 2008, 2009 recession. And I'm not sure why they think that. It could be shorter because it's like a really bad hurricane.
Yep.
But there's going to be damage for a long time to come. And if you look at the U.S. debt and the Brazil debt and the UK debt, this is going to add a lot of dollars, real, pounds to all of those places. I think it's going to be tough.
Yeah, Zach, you see government enterprise people, each one, what can we do? What we should do?
What should we do for the coronavirus in general?
Yeah, in general, supply chain, coronavirus.
Yeah, well, I would think that if you look at where the problem spots are right now in the supply chain, it's upstream. So, and it's like, let me show you one more picture here, because I love showing you pictures. So if we take a look at this, this is the LMI again, and I divided it by upstream and downstream. So downstream in this case is retailers. Those are the orange bars. Upstream is manufacturers, warehousing companies, trucking companies, logistics firms, stuff like that. So if we look at like transportation capacity, for instance, and this blue line, so this blue line is upstream, it's contracting really hard right now. Upstream, we don't have as much of a problem. It's actually growing slightly. And if you think about what that is, it's, you know, this blue line, that's the Procter & Gamble warehouse trying to ship things to the Walmart distribution center. The orange line is the Walmart distribution center getting things to Walmart stores. It's not that big of a problem there. The problem is further up the supply chain. So if we think about, you know, the only way to really get the economy going again is for the sickness to be over. Because all the economic problems, that's a symptom. So you got to take care of the sickness before you get take care of the symptom. And so I would think if I were the government and I understood supply chain, and I don't know if that's true, but if I was the government and I understood supply chain, I would work on upstream. I would look at the manufacturing for things like, you know, ventilators and masks and all that stuff, because it's a supply problem. It's not a distribution issue.
Correct.
Downstream. All the distribution crunch is upstream, and that's also where the manufacturing crunch is as well. So
I think if you take, Zach, I don't mean to interrupt you, but if you take what you're saying with what Dale's saying, there's a balance that should be thought about here as far as the economic impact, because I think what it is, it's a length of time versus depth of loss.
Yeah.
I think that's the two dimensions, right? So if you take what you're looking at and what we're finding on the LMI, and if upstream is the problem, if that's the easiest way to stem the economic impact and the burden, because it's going to have a lag effect too. You're going to see a 2-3 month timeline. If you take that in conjunction with how long do we want this to be, you know, it's like taking your medicine when you're a kid, just suck it down and you'll feel better kind of thing versus slowly do it. But yeah, anyway,
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, yeah, I would, we need to rip the Band-Aid off. We're kind of just doing it slowly in the U.S. If you look at the countries that came out on the other side, like Italy and China, Korea especially, shut down right away. And here we're kind of like, well, I guess we shouldn't go to the movies. Like we're
It's
so
the
slow
same
about
in
it.
Brazil, Zach. It's the same in Brazil. Exactly
Yeah.
the same.
Yeah.
Because you know what it is. I mean, all of it. This is it's the black swan effect. You know, there's no such thing as a black swan until you find one. So thinking about these problems, it's kind of like it's distant until it isn't. So I mean, I guess we can not go to the movies, and I guess we can do that. And then if you follow, you know, our governor in New York, Governor Cuomo's briefings, it's here. We're done with the movies for a while, you know. And there's that kind of sequential dominoes that are falling, and I think that's what the behavior that you see.
Well, and I'm hopeful, Stephen, that you guys are kind of the leader. I mean, I wish that we could vote for Governor Cuomo for president, but I don't think we can. But he seems like he's taken the leadership role pretty well. But I'm hoping that you guys are the leaders and we can actually see your numbers start to go down. And so we'll have a feeling for the trajectory of this. You know, Cavanha, it's so interesting, you know, in supply chain, and I'm sure when you were running procurement at Petrobras, you probably told your people this, but if you're not measuring it, you're not managing it.
Yeah.
And we're really not measuring this very well. And so we're sort of flying blind. And it's just one of the craziest things for such an advanced economy to be in this kind of position. I think we're going to look back on this and we're going to take a lot of lessons. And I kind of think that we're gonna one of the lessons we're gonna take away is that the U.S. has lost some of our leadership on how to handle a crisis a little bit. I'm sad about that, but I think that's going to happen.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, professors, let me ask to make a round and to see your conclusions. Which one, please? Professor
I'm going
Dale.
to stay in my basement. That's my conclusion. I'm going to try to stay in my basement with my cigars and my scotch for as long as I can until I need fresh air, and then I'll go walk around the house, and then I'll go back down.
I know it looks like Steven's got a corner office by the Chrysler building, but really I think he's in his basement. I've been down there with him where he's got a great cigar room kind of.
And Zach, do not forget to tell something about cyber attacks that is increasing, is normal.
Oh, up. Just like we said last time we were on the show a few weeks ago, you know, when you're looking this way, that's when the attackers are going to come in. There's been some big attacks, actually. There was actually one on the World Health Organization. So the WHO was actually attacked because so many more people are registering with it, and they're getting all this information from all the people who are sick. And so now there's all this information there, so people try to get in and get the information. Luckily, a lot of that was stopped. But, you know, just in general, and it's not even the cyber attacks. Like I saw an announcement today. So in the U.S., the government passed this bill. We're going to send everybody a check. And they sent out a sort of memo that said, hey, by the way, make sure you're watching the mailbox because now everyone knows when $1,000 is going to show up at your house. And so you see all these these little attacks happening around the periphery. And the WHO, that was actually kind of a famous cyber terrorist group actually that went after that. And so it's just like in any natural disaster. When there's a hurricane and no one's in the store, suddenly people are breaking into the stores and grabbing food and grabbing, you know, whatever, TVs and stuff. Like there's a famous picture of during one of the hurricanes, people walking out of the store with a TV. And
no electricity, but you get a brand new television, right?
Yeah, well, you know, you use it later. And so we're seeing that same thing right now. There's all this, everyone is so absorbed by the COVID-19 that it's a great time to launch a cyber attack because everybody's kind of looking over in the other direction. On top, I mean, like think about a place like Target, which has suffered cyber attacks in the past. We just showed you how their supply chain is totally crunched. Those pictures I was showing in the beginning of the soup, that's their shelves. So they're thinking about a lot of stuff right now. They've got workers calling out. They can't keep things on the shelves. This might be a good time. I think attackers are thinking this is a great time to launch an attack.
Yeah, that's right.
So no rest for the wicked, unfortunately.
No rest. Yeah, that's right. Okay. We appreciate this conversation with Professor Dale Rogers, Zach Rogers, and Stephen Carnovale. Thank you very much for this time.
Great to talk to you.
This was great.
Stay healthy.
Stay healthy.
Okay. Yeah, I hope I see all of you again, actually.
Yeah, we hope to.
Well, I actually have a medical mask that I cut a hole for my cigar in, so I'm good to go.
Oh my God!
So you're ready.
Oh
Yeah.
my!
Just in case, you got to be prepared.
I don't know if it works as well with the hole cut in it.
It doesn't, Zach. It's really bad. As a matter of fact, it kind of defeats the purpose because every time I puff, I have to move it up to blow the smoke. But you know, it's more for the visual effects than anything.
Let's see that we can make another cafe some weeks ago ahead, but we don't know. Okay,
we're locked down. We're not going anywhere. So,
okay.
Zachary's mother's got me under house arrest. So,
yeah, that's right.
Have you traveled at all? Have you been on a plane at all?
No.
Wow.
Yeah, unusual for me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the longest he's been in one place since like 1975.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, all right. Talk to you
Bye.
guys.
Thank you. I will send the link as soon as I have. Bye.
Awesome.
Great.